EU5 is actually quite likely my second most anticipated strategy game of all time, the other one and most anticipated one being Rome 2, and we can only hope that EU5 does not share the same launch fate as that one. We've seen quite a lot of EU5 thus far, however, thanks to the early access awarded to many of my fellow awesome YouTubers, and two awesome friends in particular, namely Schubert and Lord Lambert, have been kind enough to let me use their footage in this video, so make sure to check out their channels and give them a sub and some love as well. Now, EU4 is my most played strategy game of all time. In fact, it's likely my most played game ever. As such, EU5 has a lot to live up to, which is both a good and a bad thing. But since we have so much to go on already, let's dive into this non-exhaustive list of what's looking good, what's looking a little bad, and what's looking downright ugly. Or at least what might be undesirable. First, let's talk about the good. Number 1. The time period. EU5 does something revolutionary, and that is to turn back time to 1337 instead of the familiar 1444 start date of EU4. This isn't just a numbers game, it's a crucial 100 years of the last truly medieval century. This has three major implications. We now have the brunt of the early game gameplay being completely centered around old world politics, with what's going to be hours and hours of gameplay occurring before the European discovery of America, which now will be a mid-game phenomenon and likely completely change the pace of our campaigns. We can't forget the massive implication of the Black Death occurring only a few years after the new start date as well, in what's going to be an unstoppable and unavoidable march of death. And third, the fact that the Byzantine Empire remains somewhat of a power player means that the Roman, medieval, and antique legacies will likely live on in a bigger way than EU4, and I'm excited to see how normal it will be for the Byzantines to survive now. Number 2. The core gameplay experience. EU5 seems to be somewhat of a paradigm shift away from EU4, despite retaining that EU4 foundational soul. However, with the implementation of pops, trade, resources affecting prices, a slower expansion experience due to a new approach to Casus Belli, and more, EU5 might seem a bit scary at first. I mean, it definitely sounds quite different. But in my opinion, I would honestly much rather have a true EU5 than an EU4 too. It just has to be done well. In my opinion, EU5 sounds like a combination of EU4, Imperator, and Wiki 3 to an extent. And even though I know a lot of people have reservations against the latter two titles in particular, I still find them charming and great in their own way. What I always missed from EU4 was in fact this deeper, more grounded experience. Because even though EU4 is my favorite strategy game of all time, in the end, it kind of did end up being a game of expansion and snowballing. And even though it was very possible to play tall, the lack of pops, deep trade, and so on did take away from that experience. My hopes then is that EU5's major changes and new approaches will allow it to have its own unique identity and feel fresh, despite perhaps lacking some of EU4's depth and flavor, in stark contrast, by the way, to the Crusader King series, where CK3 basically was CK2 too, but with less content on launch. And that's what I'm hoping EU5 will avoid, and why I remain hopeful that EU5 will actually break new ground. With number 3, we're going to move away from the purely good and kind of do a mix between good and bad, and it's a big one in fact, with the map. This is a major one, and I'm choosing to put this one in this kind of ambiguous category for now, partly because I like what I'm seeing, and partly because I am a little worried. So let's talk about it. The map, capital M and trademark, is the main character in any Paradox game, and for good reason. You're going to be staring at this thing for thousands of hours, so you want it to look as good as possible. I think the EU5 map starts off well right off the bat by using a fairly sexy projection, namely the Gaull stereographic projection. Now, if you're new to Paradox games, you may find my using the word sexy to describe a map kind of weird, but I'm sorry, that's what they are, or at least that's what they can be. I appreciate that in going away from a modified Mercator projection, that Paradox focuses on making the size of the world more accurate, while at the same time trying to keep things playable and looking good. That's what the Gaull stereographic projection achieves here in my opinion, as it keeps the finer shapes and silhouettes we've become so used to in the past, and I'm especially looking at my dear Europe here, while it will hopefully give the Global South better geographical representation as well. However, maps are more than just projection, they're also in fact sizes and shapes, and it's getting kinda steamy in here. Ever since Imperator, Paradox maps have increased drastically in size, with both CK3 and Victoria 3 being so much larger than their predecessors. The same goes for EU5, with the map itself being just so much bigger than EU4's admittedly rather small size. After all, looking at Italy, EU4 is just about 2 to 3 locations in width depending, while EU5 is probably about 3 times as large, even though it's tough to measure accurately. Size isn't just about looking better though, it's also about feeling better, and with this increased width, we're able to go so much deeper into each territory and region. Finally, and crucially, it's all about the coloring and texturing, and this is where we need to talk. You know, I am of the belief that there is no single perfect map. CK2's map is dated in a lot of ways, but in the right context and with the fog of war, it still looks so damn charming even 13 years later. EU4's map has one of the worst and brightest ocean visuals I've seen, and its map can look like Play-Doh at times, but do something so simple as using a slightly darker and colored water mod, and it gets a completely new and fresh look that pulls you in. The art of the map is a complex one, because I have negatives about every one of them. Without going into too much detail, the main gist of it is this. The political map mode reigns supreme, but it is vital to have manual static options instead of just dynamic changes. The political map mode must look good and be adapted to the lowest zoom level, the fog of war should be as deep and dark as possible, and the color contrast must make sense, both when bordering other countries and the ocean itself. And finally, there should be no paper map, or at the very least, it should be optional to have a stylized top zoom map type. EU5 thus far only fulfills some of these criteria. Now every map takes some time getting used to, and I'm only judging based on images and recordings made by other people here. But so far, EU5's map is a bit of a difficult one. I do like how much it seems to focus on color, but the fact that things are completely filled and looking completely flat on top, that doesn't resonate with me. Just take a look at the Imperator map. At the top political level, you can clearly see mountain chains and other natural occurrences shape how the map looks. And importantly, there is a clear distinction between land and sea borders, with Imperator having a somewhat dark hue around its continents. On the EU5 map, everything looks more or less completely flat, with very little shade or distinctions around the sea borders. Take a look at the submission from Redditor Glasses905 and how much better just a small tweak to shading of the ocean tiles looks, because we get that nice contrast between land and deep sea. In addition, I have to admit I'm a big fan of region borders as well being visible on the top map, as it gives a lot of needed texture to these big masses of color. It's what I've done in my mod for CK3, which instead of the somewhat bland paper map, shows every country nicely outlined and with region borders visible. Indeed, most Paradox games do this, at least the best ones like CK2 and EU4. And to my last point about contrast, I need Paradox to take Fog of War seriously again. No, I'm not talking about the useless ugly white clouds in Imperator, I'm talking about actual Fog of War, the darkness in CK2 and EU4 that really makes you focus on your own realm, and which creates a one-of-a-kind, beautiful, contrasty image. Look, by the way, how these colors, which are literally textured, play so well with the equally beautiful water graphics. I mean, this actually looks like water, and it looks so alive and again, textured, and this is a 13-year-old game. Finally, please let me toggle my map modes like in CK2 and EU4, and for God's sakes, why does Paradox hate minimaps now? Justice for the minimap, I say. Bring back the minimap, and even add some color for good measure as far as your diplomatic range can see. For now then, I remain cautiously optimistic for the map, especially after Paradox seems to have taken a quick turn and implemented a similar height map as Imperator, which looks fantastic and much more realistic than the almost CK3-like map we've seen thus far. I also actually really like how the political map looks a bit more zoomed in, because here you can actually see the region borders within countries, and also what looks like lakes or rivers. Because, and real talk, right now, this to me looks like a little childish, and if someone just spilled muted colors all over the map, whose oceans, by the way, looks way too bright and lacking in color. This, however, a bit more zoomed in, looks like it has depth, texture and heart to it, although it still lacks that sexy fog of war around my country and allies, which I desperately want to see here. So please, give the political map mode some more pizzazz and charm, and that thick dark fog of war, and have it feature all the way until the medium zoom level like in both CK2 and EU4, and not just on the ground. Give me my region borders, let me see some of those mountains through the map color like in Imperator, make the water look as good and alive as in CK2, and Paradox, we shall have peace. Number 4, a possibly bad aspect now, namely the lack of proper mission trees. Now admittedly, I don't know if this will be in the game or not. Apparently they weren't in the version shown to content creators, as none of them showed them off, and Paradox themselves actually posted a poll concerning how much people want mission trees in their game. A lot of people does, it turns out. However, it looks like mission trees might not be in the game at launch then, or maybe they will. However, the fact that we don't know is a bad sign. Now why mission trees, you ask? Well, mission trees is a genius way to give some structure and optional pathways in any campaign, because you get rewarded for accomplishing various goals, and it adds a lot of flavor to any campaign. Whether it's mission trees in EU4, missions in Imperator, focus trees in HOI 4, or journal entries in Victoria 3, mission trees are in my opinion vital to the experience now. I really hope this makes it into EU5, but if not, that is definitely bad. Number 5, and it's time to talk about the ugly. It is my opinion that the UI in EU5 looks rather atrocious. Not everything about it, mind you. I think the top middle section is by far the best one, with its quite beautiful banners and smaller windows at the very top, accompanied by appropriate icons. I'm also a big fan of the artwork and images like the 100 Years' War. The battle image in it especially looks amazing. A relatively unique pop-up like the Age of Renaissance Age also looks quite nice. But then there's kind of everything else. What the heck is my monarch doing in the top left? That's where my big flag or coat of arms is supposed to be, you goof. I don't want to see my possibly quite goofy looking character there at all times, and it looks completely messy at that. And while on the topic, oh how I wish that the monarchs looked like paintings or something more handcrafted and drawn instead of 3D characters. I unironically still think CK2's characters look better than CK3's and Victoria 3's. But moving on. Why is the game telling me my own name at all times from the top window when I can just open my country menu to see it? And why does the text and font look like it's amateurishly floating atop the admittedly nice textured background? And the same applies to the age name on the right side of the screen, by the way. It just looks off in a big way. I'm not a big fan of this modern, slick-looking menu style that keeps popping up in game after game, and I have to say, I absolutely despise these big blue buttons. They're so, excuse me, but mobile icons and look way too polished and modern to have any right to be in freaking EU5. And light blue? Come on, at least make them faded brown or textured gold or something. Now again, I haven't played EU5 myself, but I do get the feeling that EU5 have at least thus far gone for substance over style in almost all aspects, which should not be the case. At the very least, it should be both substance and style, because style has so much to say in the long-term and immersion departments. Additionally, I want to point out that despite presumably having made for some deep and easily moddable mechanics, the menu windows for both the Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire do nothing for me, not even a little. Where is the giant golden eagle and the coat of arms? Where is the unique and also flavorful symbols and gilded menus for my unique organizations? Where is the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? I want, no I need, no I demand that Paradox takes a big hard look at itself and realizes that unique symbols, tailored windows, and the artworks and sound effects that may come with them is so integral to the essence of what it means to play a Paradox game, and that alongside the map, the unique menus are there to immerse the player in these time periods and, despite looking at the same screen for hours on end, make us feel like we're walking the halls of the Emperor, as if we're taking on the mantle of Pope or the hegemony of China. As such, I am begging Paradox to pay extra care to their unique menu windows because they truly make the entire difference. Also, again, where is my minimap? I am extremely excited for EU5, but as you can tell, I have some concerns which I hope will be addressed at least in some fashion. I know I'm not alone in this either, as many other people than myself have mentioned that the UI needs work, and not just in the visual department either. However, Paradox has been excellent at taking feedback thus far, and we can only hope that they consider the likely mountains of feedback they got from YouTubers seriously moving forward. Those were some of my thoughts on EU5 as of now, but let me know your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And thanks again to both Schubert and Lord Lambert for their footage. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.